This was one of the biggest pieces of news of the last month or so, but it's quite old news as we're recording this now, is that Tammy Sytch was sentenced to 17.6 years. And because she's in Florida, she must do at least 85% of her time before she's eligible for parole. And I'm sure everybody knows the story. I'm going to very quickly just rattle through it because, I mean, I've read it so many times before, but March 2022, Tammy Sytch, almost 4 times over the legal limit for blood alcohol, crashed a sedan in a high-rate speed into Julian Lasseter 75's car, Daytona Beach, kills him, injures 3 people in the car in front of Julian Lasseter's car as well. I believe she was driving. I think she gave the excuse something to do with she was going getting ingredients for tacos or something like that. Anyway, that was the excuse she gave. She ends up getting arrested quite a few weeks afterwards, and then she gets her bail revoked on May 13th. And what else should I add? Yes, so did you see any of the actual judgment itself? Because it was all live streamed.
Yes, in fact, you can imagine that my phone started, going crazy. Everybody, hey, you're watching this, and the everything you said is the way I understand it. I don't want to in any way give anybody to misunderstand what I'm saying. I'm not giving Tammy a get out of jail free card, but this in the business that we were in, where people get sort of this bubble wrap put around them by the business. Hey, you can go ahead and do whatever you want. And how many times I've talked about this 10,000 times, how many times. And I was always the last guy to take the piss test because everybody had my piss in Visine bottles to be able to pass the test. Just those sorts of things that somehow we get treated differently in many respects. I think in Tammy's case, that didn't serve well. The young girl that I'd first met in ECW, I was aware of Tammy and had met her, like to say hello, but to get to know her in ECW along with Chris, very intelligent young lady. Had told me at one point that she was accepted to medical school. This was at the same time that I was prepping for med school. And so I would throw things at her and she knew her stuff. So I can't say that she was accepted to medical school, but I know that she knew medicalese pretty well. Medicalese can get sort of daunting for lay people. She was pretty crisp with it. All had a fairly good head on her shoulders, understood the business pretty well, seemed to be very much a level-headed girl. And I keep asking myself, through all those drunk driving incidences, where again, she was obviously treated differently. Most people get popped once or twice and they're in like serious trouble. And she sort of kept getting this little slap on the wrist and pushed off to the side. And again, that doesn't make it okay. But you can see from her point of view, well, I've done this before, I can do 2-3 weeks in jail, whatever. Me, I couldn't spend 5 minutes in a jail cell.
Well, to interrupt you, actually, she has spent time in prison before for this. So, it's a series of DUIs, and then she probably did like 6 to 9 months on one arrest eventually, and that didn't dissuade her from carrying it on anymore. Before I let you go back off again, I'm going to tell you what she got. So obviously the 17.5 years, she served something like 500 odd already with remand, so that's all in the bank. She will serve an additional 8 years in probation, including substance abuse and alcohol education orders, $10,000 fine. This is the one I found funny: 50 hours of community service, and her driving license is gone for good. Now, did you see any specifically of the expert medical witness testifying on Tammy's behalf?
I did not.
Well, here's the... it sort of becomes a bit comedy-like a bit. So the medical expert says... the video is far too long to show to go through it, but to wrap it up, Tammy suffers from PTSD and probably CTE from all those concussions that she was never in matches for. And then symptoms of bipolar disorder and various dissociative episodes, and of course borderline personality disorder. Now, after the medical examiner who was brought in to testify on Tammy's behalf is grilled by the prosecution basically says, how do you know all this? I mean, have you got any proof? And it's like, and then, Tammy filled in a questionnaire.
Oh, Jesus.
So this guy had no knowledge of Tammy before this. So 90 minutes, either face-to-face or reading the questionnaire this medical examiner had with Tammy. And then the prosecution said, well, where are the MRIs and brain scans to prove the history of Tammy's physical issues, including CTE? Or, I mean, you can't, with CTE, you can't definitively prove it, but, a history of head injuries and stuff. And the medical guy couldn't provide anything.
Incredible, yeah.
So
that's wild.
Yeah,
it's if you've ever been in a courtroom at all, both sides have done their homework supposedly, and the fact that this guy would think that was going to fly and that was not going to be challenged. I mean, it's like you said, it becomes almost like a comedy of errors at that point. And I think then to the court in general, it just looks really bad. She filled out a questionnaire and give this this sweeping medical diagnosis on.
It's probably check boxes of dissociative disorder sounds good, bipolar. I mean, not that she may not have some of these things. I question CTE,
right?
Because I mean, she may have been in a few like hair pull valet kind of matches, but how many? I remember seeing Sonny ever take a bump.
Maybe she did. Not like Franny did. Not like Franny did bumps. So like most of the cat fight stuff. I'm sure in her career, because she did have a few matches, but the CTE stuff I think is cumulative, long time, night after night type of thing. Professional football players and now wrestlers, boxers, were starting to find out. A few days prior to this happening, I had seen Tammy at WrestleCon, maybe it was WrestleCade. She and Francine were there together, so I went over to say hello to them, and we spoke. But Franny and I were at WrestleCon in Dallas that year, and Franny kept, texting on the phone between fans, and I said, like, who you talking to? She said, Tammy, and I said, hey, look, be careful, I said, because she's gonna have to, I'd heard other stories, and I just didn't want Franny getting like too close there and ended up getting yanked in, and so she's gonna end up killing somebody. And I said it just like an off the cuff remark, never in my dreams hoping or believing that would even be possible because of the girl that I had known. And she said, I just said that. And she held her phone up and Tammy had responded, I'll never let that happen. This is 2 or 3 or 4 days prior. So Franny, of course, texted me first. That was the first I heard of it. And I was like, oh my God, no, how? My understanding is at this time she was making quite a bit of money, doing the sex stuff online, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars per month. So if you wanted tacos, or I had heard that she was going looking for a boyfriend, fill in that blank, whatever the reason, call an Uber, call a taxi, rent a limousine. But I'm sure if she could do it over now, like I always talk to my kids, like the moral for everybody listening out there is there are no do-overs. So you got to make sure you've got it right each time as much as you can. To be honest with you, I thought she got off light. I was expecting like 25 plus years. I don't know anything about the parameters.
Let me tell you the parameters. So the prosecution was recommending a maximum of, I think, somewhere around 27, maybe 27 and a bit, 27 and a half. So she got about 10 years less than was possible. So in that sense, you should think herself lucky.
Yeah, well, especially because again, like when you're involved in this kind of any kind of case, the first thing you do is go radio silent, right? Regardless of what's being said out there.
Well, I'm so glad you mentioned that because I've got 2 quotes from Tammy Sitch after the, let's call it the incident. A fan asked her, how fast were you going when you slammed into the poor old guy, stopped at a traffic light and killed him? His life ended for what reason? Were you on your way to a fire or drunk or high? And then Sitch responded, about how fast? About 10 miles per hour, which it wasn't. Since I was slowing down to a light, but the guy who she killed, Julian Lester, but he had a heart attack, and then she adds, nothing to do with my seizure. So she was claiming that she had a seizure behind the wheel, and then somehow killed him at 10 miles an hour, and then he had a heart attack.
Yeah. See, again, this is the stuff, if you're going to say this when you're under oath, anything you say once you're on that stand, is open to cross
Oh, no, no,
examination.
no. Well, that was on Facebook. That was public for all to see. So yeah, she was trying to lay the groundwork of a defence before she even saw the inside of a
Sure.
courtroom there.
Yeah. Well, my understanding too is that from a mutual friend that she was online a day or two after, like MFing people that were burying her online.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. If anyone says anything negative about me, you will be blocked and never unblocked. You don't know the real story, so don't act like you're some effing journalist when all you do is type from your mum's basement. Done. Now, I'm so glad you mentioned that. It's like on cue. Now, one more thing I would like to bring up to your attention is, did you see Tammy's plea to the judge before sentencing?
I did not.
Now, she mentioned a few amusing things here. That's very much spinning the tail to her thing. Now, Tammy's statement was focused mostly on herself, her woe is me life. I mean, I'm sure I mentioned somewhere, it's like, them beautiful white women, they just have it so difficult, don't they? Everything's everybody else's fault, and most laughably of all, that somehow Chris Candido is to blame for her downward spiral by not only getting her out of medical school, apparently that was his fault, but then subsequently and selfishly dying in 2005. Now, Tammy also claimed that her life went off the rails in 2005 and not beforehand. That she said in court, and I mean, you know the story of Tammy. I mean, she was fired from the WWF in '98 for drugs, ECW in 1999. At least partially for drugs. I know she was suspended or something like that, and then WCW, I think she was let go for drugs as well. So she's completely changing the timeline to fit basically a real life tragedy of Chris Candido to her benefit.
Yeah, look, I guess when you're in that position, you got to try to throw whatever crap to the wall and see what sticks, right? But it seemingly has worked in some degree, because they were looking for 27 years and she got 10 less. Look, I say this all the time. I don't ever want to hurt myself in a car accident or anybody in the car with me, but I sure as hell even less want to hurt anybody else. And in this day and age, I mean, it's just the world. I've made a bazillion stupid mistakes in my life. Thankfully, none of them ever hurt anybody else. And I that's the part when you try to like allege that this guy had a heart attack or I had a seizure or whatever. Again, best to just sit back. I don't care what people are saying online. You got to throw yourself on a sword at this point. And again, I'm sure if Tammy had the chance to do a do-over, she would do it. Unfortunately, that opportunity doesn't exist, and there's another human being dead because of it, and other people injured because of just after all those other DUIs. Like you said, that didn't teach you a lesson. Well, you put me in a jail cell for 5 minutes, that would cure me of whatever you're yelling at me about. So it's just a tragedy all around. It's a tragedy this family will never be able to undo. She will at some point, if it's 85%, I don't know how old Tammy is now, but she'll be near her 70s. And
she's about 50 now, so if she gets out, she'd be about 65 if she did the whole bid, 66, something like that.
So, I mean, the business has now gone behind. But I hope if Tammy hears this, I hope she hears what I'm saying with this. This is, there are no do-overs, there's no time machines. We can't go back and undo stuff. But in whatever way she could turn this positive, to go out there and speak to younger people about drinking and driving, or today smoking pot because it's legal so many places, being inebriated in any way and getting behind the wheel of a car. I always tell my kids, think of the worst thing that can happen and assume it will, and then do everything you can to avoid that. Because, full disclosure, we were younger, drinking and driving. In the business, we were always, slapping a beer down or something in the car, never getting, sloppy drunk or anything. But thank God we never had that kind of an incident. And, the world is where it is now, and we have to live in the world as it is today. So thank God that happened then and not now. And thank God we didn't hurt anybody. But it's, I think this should be a morality tale for anybody out there, because, Tammy was literally at the upper echelons, right? I mean, she was that first huge diva in the WWF. Uh, had just an unbelievably beautiful girl and a very intelligent girl. And what could have been from that? You take all that DNA and throw it all in a blender. What could have been the outcome of that? And instead, yes, Chris dying, I'm sure, had an impact on her. But there were things going on before that were pretty questionable and pretty heady. She's got a lot of time to think about it. So hopefully, that brilliant young girl that I knew when I first met, hopefully she can figure out a way to take this and turn it into whatever kind of positive, hopefully keeping somebody else from going down that same avenue and having to endure the same punishment and watch on your life and everything else. Really just all the way around, a really sad and completely avoidable ending of a freedom in your life. It's about as bad as it gets.